In this unit, I'm going to cover basic copyright law, talk about how the Digital Millennium Copyright Act has affected the copyright law, and how music technology has changed the copyright over the years. But first, I'm going to give you a little background on the music industry and how it began. When most people think about the music industry, there's a couple of things that they come to mind about that. They usually think about the live concerts, the albums that they listen to or download, and also how different artists are marketed. It's rare that the average music appreciator thinks about the different tedious contract negotiations that happen between that artist and their record label, or how the contracts work between members in a band. So that's what the music industry is. Now, in the late 1990s, Napster was a website that was brought up, and Napster helped the consumer bypass the normal ways of distribution, but they also bypass the different copyright laws, which is how most artists get paid. But if we can back up even further and look at how the different formats have evolved over the years, back in 1870, music was recorded onto a wax cylinder, and it was an acoustic process where the louder the sound was in a room, that sound pressure would vibrate a needle and that would carve into the wax cylinder. In 1887, Edison recorded the first human voice, and that actually gave him a patent on the technique of recording, not necessarily what he was using to record, but how he recorded, which was interesting. Music started to begin as a business. People realized that they could record music and actually sell it. Someone could take it home and listen to it. In 1914, one of the first performing rights organizations was formed, which is ASCAP. ASCAP stands for American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And in 1909, when the first copyright law was enacted, ASCAP worked hand in hand with them to help protect copyrights. So in 1903 was the first release on disc from Monarch record label. And in 1906, the format change was more of a Victrola gramophone. And in 1930, gramophone and Columbia Gramophone merged. Okay, and they became the Electrical and Musical Industries, or EMI. And EMI actually was a huge record label and still remain one of four remaining major distributors in the United States today. As music was released on disc, there was another way that you could bring music out there. Now, radio was originally meant to be two-way communication. I talk to you, you talk to me over the radio waves. But then it became seen as a way to promote music. And in 1906 was the first broadcast of radio, and actually became a commercial product in 1920 as well. So people thought it would be great to listen to music in their homes. However, the people that worked in the industry thought that radio would become a way to end it. And if you think about what's going on now with downloading music or streaming online, it's kind of the same thing that's happening. People are still fearful of new technologies, just like they were with radio. And you can compare that to what's happening now with the music industry and copyrights. So let's look at what happened between 1929 and 1938. During that time period, sales of $75 million dropped to $26 million, and it was only $5 million in music sales that occurred in 1933. And you can pretty much assume that the reason the sales dropped is the introduction of radio, obviously the Great Depression, but we all know that when we listen to the radio now, that is a huge way for us to find new music, and it's also a great way for labels to market the artists that they're trying to sell. Now, if you compare the two, radio and music that's free online, radio worked where you would call into a DJ in the 50s, and they would be able to play your requests. Right now I want to hear Billie Holiday, and the DJ would get it on the air. However, the user didn't necessarily have anything to take home to listen to. Now, if you listen free online, that's an illegal download instead of buying it. However, in compared to the radio end, the listener now, they can download something online and they can burn it on a CD or put it on their MP3 player and take it to wherever they want to go, unlike early radio. Now, other media that has also been around, you can see there, is when the records and audio cassettes started to come into play, starting in the 40s, going through the 60s with audio cassettes. The 1970s was actually the first time that the digital medium was brought in, and that was led by Philips, which was a French company. And then Sony Philips designed a new audio disc, the CD, and they decided for it to be at 16-bit and 44.1 kilohertz sampling rate. And 1644.1 is still the standard, but that's a whole other discussion on the Nyquist theorem and digital audio. What's interesting about the CD is that when the CD was originally spec'd out of how much music should be on this, Sony thought that one CD should be able to hold Beethoven's Ninth, and Beethoven's Ninth Symphony lasts 74 minutes in total. The very first release was actually ABBA and their record The Visitors in 1982. That was released in Germany. Now, some people will talk about that they thought Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits was the first release. I'm talking about the first commercial release, not the first US release, but the first commercial release. And that was ABBA's record The Visitors back in Germany in 1982. Now, as the formats changed, the United States market thought that CDs would confuse the consumer. Are they going to try to put this on their record player and put the needle on it? Are the consumers going to know what to do? However, in 2000, global CD sales peaked at 2,455 billion units, and a unit is one CD. So in the year 2000, those sales peaked at a huge number. Backtracking a bit, 1989 was the release of the digital audio tape, and what was great about digital audio tape is that people could record something at home, re-record on it again, and not have any problem with sound quality. Now, if you try to do that with audio cassettes, you'll notice that every time you tape over something, the quality gets a little more muffled or a little more of a problem going on. And the DAT ended that. You were able to have a crisp, clear sound recording every single time. And because that happened, that resulted in the Home Recording Act in 1992, which we'll cover shortly as well. So right here you can look at the timeline. In the 1870s, we started with the cylinder. In 2001, we have the iPod, obviously the iPad now as well. But you can see it was kind of a slow start. And as the years go up, 1989, 1998, 1999, 2001, and as we continue on here, we keep ramping up with how fast that technology is coming out. And that's causing an issue of Congress to react with copyrights, and the artists to react with copyrights. The MP3 file completely changed everything. And what that does is essentially compresses or compacts your audio files into smaller sizes so you can get more songs, more information onto your MP3 player or iPod. And for the most part, it sounds pretty good. It's not the best file that's out there, but it sounds pretty good. Randomly speaking, like, what does it mean? How much smaller? It's usually about 10% the size of the CD file. Now, on my iPod at home, I have about 7,800 songs, and they fit in my pocket. When I took those off the CDs that I bought, and as I add music when I buy it on iTunes, I can expand it. But if I were to take that 7,800 song count and transform it into a CD, where the CD can only hold 74 minutes, that would be a huge issue of space. The MP3 was actually developed by a German company as well. And any MP3 player, here's the interesting part, any MP3 player that you have actually pays a licensing fee to that German company, Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, and they're the ones that actually developed that whole MP3 file type. Now the MP3 file type is great. It's easily, you can easily share it over lines. You can upload songs in less than a minute, and that brought out companies and websites such as mp3.com where independent bands could share their music. And because they could do that without fees or people could download it, that was actually one of the first music business lawsuits, because that website, mp3.com, was making copyrighted material available for free, which is in violation of copyright, as you'll see in the next lesson. Napster was a huge website in the 90s. Sean Fanning was the person that designed that website, and he went to school in Boston. And essentially he thought you could have a P2P or peer-to-peer website of sharing your music online. In November of 2000, over 1.7 billion songs were shared. Just in November. Sales declined to over $500 million in 2000. The Recording Industry Association of America then wanted to sue for $100,000 per song traded. So per song, not per person that did it, but per song. If you shared 3 songs, they were looking for $300,000 from you, which obviously is pretty steep, you can imagine. So Napster's defense was, well, those songs weren't on our servers. We didn't have any control over it. We shouldn't be liable. It wasn't our fault because it was on someone else's computer, going to someone else's computer. We never had it. But, you know, it was under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Napster lost. There was an injunction issued in February of 2001. They were shut down. However, you can't stop that idea. So different sites like Kazaa, Morpheus, all those things that ramped into something else started to come out. 2003, the Recording Industry Association of America started to go after individual people. They were suing 30,000 downloaders at that time in 2008. They were looking for $150,000 per violation. And some people actually did settle and got it talked down to about $12,000. Other people continue to fight in court. And what's happening right now is the Recording Industry Association of America is working with internet service providers to find out who is in violation of copyright, who's sharing way too much music or videos or copyright protected work online. And they're actually tracking that, and they will send letters out if they feel as though you're in violation of it. There's been a couple of instances that students have told me that they've gotten those letters of cease and desist, or we know what you're doing, please stop.